So I have that moment. You don't have this moment, but I have that moment when you open up your iPad, right? And you go to swipe on the screen to pull up your notes. And your kids have obviously, I think, been eating jelly beans and watching videos. Yeah, and I'm just like, ew, right? Like, ew. All right, so that's my night. So, yeah, I was out last week because I was sick. Welcome to another midweek, though. If you're visiting, my name is Jason. I'm the middle school pastor. So I was out sick. Pastor Muniz filled in for me, and that was super awesome of him to do that. He said some things about me, though. I saw the video that I didn't think were very nice.
Did you ask her squirts?
No. No, and besides, why are you asking that right now? Like, even if I did, I wouldn't be like, yeah, they were totally bad. Like, no, I would never do that. Oh, you're weird. Oh, so, no. No, actually, I just had allergies, and in a previous time, I would have just come up and preached. It sounded kind of like that, but I would have been like, no big deal. But in COVID days, you can't do that. You can't be like, all right, I need to preach real quick. Like, no one's going to be like, they're all going to leave. All right, so I decided to stay home for your sake. So, but I feel much better, and thank you for those who actually asked. No one came and asked me on Easter if I was feeling any better. Oh, wait, you did. You're right. The adult did. So anyways, Easter was an amazing service. You guys have a good Easter? That was convincing. All right. Did you have a good Easter? Yay. There's much rejoicing. Hey, deviled eggs is always good. All right, so how many of you guys came to our church for Easter services? I know some of you guys went out of town or something like that, other family. All right, so you came to ours. All right, how many of you guys went to the gym? Okay. How many of you guys went to one of the main worship services in the worship center? Okay. I was about to say, how many of you guys went to both? Is there both? You went to both? Yeah, there's a couple of you that are serving. All right, so it's about even. Okay. I was interested to see what that was going to be. All right, so my highlight from Easter was getting to baptize two people. All right, one of them was Allison Hainline, who's not here tonight. I don't see her, but so she's 7th grade. It's so much fun. Wait. Sneaky? Oh, you were hoping I wouldn't notice. All right, so, yeah, it was tons of fun, but, yeah, I got to her and I said, hey, I got good news and bad news. And I was like, do you want the good news first or the bad news? She's like, give me the good news. I'm like, hey, you're getting baptized. She says, what's the bad news? The heater's broken. Yeah, and so, like, you get in the baptistry and immediately your body's just like that, like, oh man, like Ishitutney's supposed to be at 72. Let's just say we were a couple ticks below that. Okay, like it was cold. So my favorite was the other guy was Tyler Bennett. Okay, he's 4th grade, and he comes in and I say, all right, there's the question, right? Why are you coming to be baptized? I asked this of everybody who gets baptized, and this is his response. Because Jesus is my Savior. Like, that was, like, he was so cool. It was amazing. So we have that on video. It's so good. All right, so it was a really great Easter. Now, were we able to get that video up yet of Josh? Okay, so some of you guys did our family mission day. Oh, here he comes. All right, so some of you guys did our family mission day over at Refuge Church. They had an amazing Easter, by the way. And so for those of you guys who were able to serve and stuff like that, I had Josh make a quick video. I said, hey, bro, can you do me a favor and make a quick video about how your Easter was and stuff like that for our group, especially those who served. This is what I get back. All right, so ready?
Hey, MSM. Jason asked me to shoot a video, give you guys a little bit of info about how our Easter went. Well, we had over 200 people. How amazing is that? This past Sunday, Easter Sunday, we had over 200 people outside under a tent at Refuge. It's the most we've ever had, man. We're just so encouraged with what God's doing at Refuge, and now He's bringing people. We had, man, probably 30 or 40 guests, like people that came for the first time. So again, thanks again, man, for the service and the work you guys are doing and prayers for us out at Refuge. We're really excited about what God is doing, and we're excited that we have so many people showing up to Refuge, man, to hear the gospel, man, to be transformed by the gospel and to be sent by the gospel. Keep praying, man. We're excited to see over the next couple of weeks some of these folks who are new to Refuge become members as we start offering membership classes and membership. And the last Sunday of April, really cool things, our first ever baptism at Refuge, man. So thanks for praying, cheering us on. We're grateful for you.
All right, so did you hear that? Over 200 people. This church is only 1 year old, technically. All All right, and by technically, I mean like last Easter was supposed to be their first Sunday, in-person, live worship, all that, and guess what? COVID. So they didn't have anything online, or they had anything in person. Everything was online. Not really until closer to the summer did they get to start doing in-person. And so they had to do worship outside, had over 200 underneath the tent because they couldn't all fit them into the main worship center. And a lot of what you guys did, getting the property ready, they had 30 or 40 visitors. That is huge for a one-year-old church. Like the average Southern Baptist church, by the way, is about 150 to 250 people. The average, like that's the normal size church, okay? So it's amazing. And so for you guys who partnered in that, just celebrate the Lord, what He's doing in Refuge. I think it's really cool. We're probably going to see some more videos from them about the baptism, and just excited that you guys got to participate in that. So, all right, tonight we're going to begin a brief 4-week series on the book of Ruth called Gathering Virtue. Okay, so Ruth is only 4 chapters long, so we're going to do a chapter a week, and I'm calling it Gathering Virtue. All right, we got that slide up there for you guys. Here it comes.
3, 2,
It's coming.
1.
There it is. Look at that. All right, so I call Ruth the Hallmark movie of the Bible. Yeah, all right. Ruth is the Hallmark movie of the Bible. So I went online and looked at all these Hallmark movie titles, and no joke, I'm going to make a Hallmark movie title screen. All right, I think I nailed it, but how do you guys think? Is that nailed it? I stole their fonts and everything, y'all. And here's the thing, they only have 3 fonts. All their movies are the same 3 fonts. Nothing is creative, including the storyline, because if you've seen one, you've seen them all. Right? You know what I'm talking about? So, I mean, listen, you might like the cheesy Hallmark movies. It's totally fine. Thanksgiving comes around, and my wife just Hallmark Channel, here we go. Right? Her favorite, hang on, let's see if I can remember the name of it. It's with the dude up in Canada, the Mountie. You know what I'm talking about? When Calls the Heart. Yeah. See this girl. She's a Hallmark person. I caught you. I did that on purpose. All right, so she loves that one. And spoiler alert, is the dude Jack and he dies? I had to console her that night. I had to be it'll be okay. He's not really dead. It's just an actor, right? Anyways. So we talked about, it's going to be Gathering Virtue. I made a cringy title screen for this. And the reason we're calling it Gathering Virtue is for a couple of reasons. Most of the Book of Ruth actually occurs in a field of barley. So barley's a lot like wheat, very similar. You can make bread, all that fun stuff. And so gathering in the wheat, gathering in the barley, so that's the gathering part. But then the interesting piece, when you look at the Book of Ruth, it's really not the Hallmark movie that we want it to be. So when we think of love and love stories and stuff like that, we think of Hallmark movies. For example, they all follow the same plot line. Like I said, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. Let's see if this sounds familiar. Some city girl who has spent years pursuing a career and maybe has had a string of bad boyfriends has some awkward reason to go to the country. Right? Have I described a Hallmark movie yet? At least 37 of them, right? Yeah, okay, so she goes to this country place. There she meets some kind of lumberjack man, farmer, something like that, right? Who has a really loud and embarrassing family. She's drawn to him because of his family. Secretly, she thinks that rednecks are backwards, and so she can't love him, right? And she struggles with that idea. But then somewhere right around the 1 hour mark in the movie, you know what I'm talking about? They begin to have a serious conversation. And all of a sudden, she sees him differently for the new time. They embrace, and snow begins to fall, right? It's that's at least 37 movies, at least, right? It's the same movie, okay? Lumberjack man, city girl, happily forever after. Okay, so Ruth is nothing like that. As Americans, we try to turn Ruth into that, but that's really not kind of Bible language. Bible language, when it talks about love or loving kindness, it's talking more about character and actions than emotions. The Bible is much more interested in your character, who you are, and how you behave according to who you are, than how you feel. Does that make sense? So I want us to dive into the book of Ruth, and really, I'm going to kind of model this after my Esther series. Was anybody here for Esther when we went through Esther years ago? Maybe some 8th graders, yeah. Like, I remember this moment. It was hilarious, and I did not see it coming. It's like week 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6, however long the series was. And I'm going through the story, right? I'm telling the story of Esther. And I get to the part where Naaman is about to get in trouble. And I'm like, oh, and by the world... Sorry, what did I say? Haman. Sorry, Naaman's a different guy. All right, so Haman is about to get hung, right? Like, he's going to get caught, okay? And so when I said that out, this was everybody on the edge of their seats, like, oh... Like, spoiler alert, like somebody actually said that out loud, like, oh man, you just ruined the story for me. I'm like, okay, first off, the story has been there for a long time. You could have just read ahead. Second, I was kind of surprised that at some point in the past, maybe, children's ministry life, you didn't get that full story or something. And so what I began to realize is some of these Old Testament stories, there's a lot of richness to them that a lot of you guys haven't fully experienced. So what I want to do is walk us through the story every week. And then I'm just going to kind of lift some lessons out for us, like, the moral of story kind of concept. But really, mostly, I just want you to kind of lean in and just kind of immerse yourself in the story, if that makes sense. All right, so we're going to be in Ruth. Okay? We're just going through chapter 1. We're going to go through all of chapter 1. We're going to break it into 2 sections, and then we're going to kind of debrief, I guess, and look at these important lessons. So, Ruth, has everybody found Ruth? Yeah? All right, it's right after Judges, okay? Because it happens during Judges, okay? Yep, happens during Judges, so it's going to be right after Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and then the events of Ruth actually lead into the events of 1st and 2nd Samuel. Yep, hence its order. All right, so during the time of the Judges, there was a famine in the land. A man left Bethlehem, his home, in Judah, with his wife and 2 sons to stay in the territory of Moab for a while. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. The names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. Terrible person to do that. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They entered the fields of Moab and settled there. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. Her sons took Moabite women as their wives. One was named Orpah, and the second was named Ruth. After they lived in Moab for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died. And Naomi was left without her 2 children and without her husband. She and her daughters-in-law set out to return from the territory of Moab, because she had heard in Moab that the Lord had paid attention to his people's needs by providing them food, meaning back in Bethlehem. She left the place where she had been living, accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, and traveled along the road leading back to the land of Judah. Naomi said to them, each of you go back to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to the dead and to me. May the Lord grant each of you rest in the house of a new husband. She kissed them, and they wept loudly. They said to her, we insist on returning with you to your people. But Naomi replied, return home, my daughters. Why do you want to go with me? Am I able to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters, go on, for I am too old to have another husband, even if I thought there was still hope for me to have a husband tonight and to bear sons. Would you be willing to wait for them to grow up? Would you restrain yourselves from remarrying? No, my daughters, my life is too bitter. That's important. My life is too much bitter for you to share, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. That's important right there. If you're looking for like verses to underline so you understand what's really going on, right there, no, my daughters, my life is much too bitter for you to share, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. Again, they wept loudly, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Okay, let's stop right there. So, first I want you to kind of realize that God's people suffer too. Suffering is universal. There's this thought, especially among American Christians, because we're all so stinking entitled, that if we believe in God and we've placed our faith in Him, everything should be great. Life should be awesome. There should be no problems. God's people suffer too. This story starts with a very difficult position to be in. First, it's during the Judges. Okay, so if you don't know Bible history, what's going on, there's Moses, okay, who let my people go out of Egypt, right? And they wander for 40 years, watch an entire generation die off. Rough. And then they go into the promised land with Joshua leading them. Joshua is already old by the time they get to the promised land. When they get there, they kind of all settle in, build their houses. Shortly thereafter, Joshua dies because he's old. And then there's no leaders. The nation is leaderless as a nation for generations. Like hundreds of years, about 400-year gap of no leaders. The closest they get are these guys and ladies, because there's a couple, called the Judges. Like maybe you've heard of Samson with his flowing locks, right? Okay, who, by the way, is a terrible example of godliness, okay? He's like the anti-story in the book, like this is not how you act, okay? There's others. My favorite is Ehud. Do you know why?
Oh, Ehud's the guy that stabbed the king?
Yes.
And the fat closed around the sword.
That's right. That's right. Ehud stabs the super fat king and with a dagger, and the king was so fat that when he let go of the sword, the fat just enveloped the sword. I'm like, bro, you got diabetes or something. Like, that's too much, okay? So, yeah, so there's guys like that. Gideon, one of the ladies is Deborah, okay? So there's these judges, and they would last for a little bit, and then there would be leaderlessness, okay? And so imagine being in a nation where there's no government, there's no police force, there's no court system, there's no justice. That's Israel in this period, all right? Then a famine hit the land. Now, a famine is when all the food is gone, okay? Or it's super scarce. And it can happen for a bunch of different reasons. Like a simple one would be maybe like extended drought, okay? Or a hurricane or something like that. Most often, though, famines happen because of war. So because we don't have too many wars on our land, we haven't really seen that in America since the Civil War. Because during the Civil War, the Union and the South would invade the other and then burn their crops. That's what you did because now you can't feed your soldiers. And so war tends to do that. There's a lot of places in the world that have no food on a regular basis because of war. But sometimes it happens really more just to like random natural causes or things like that. But for whatever reason, Elimelech fled the famine that was in Judah and goes to Moab. Now we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but let me explain this a little bit more. In 1915, there was the boll weevil invasion of South Georgia, South Alabama. Matter of fact, there is a town in South Alabama that has a statue of this lady in the center of the city holding up a boll weevil. And a boll weevil, if you're like, what's that? Is an insect. It's like this ugly little beetle, and it eats the boll, or the part of the cotton plant where the cotton comes from. So they had these big cotton farms, and they went from like 9-point-something million acres of land that grew cotton to like only like 100,000. Just a massive decrease. And so tons of farmers were out of money, couldn't pay off their debts to the land, they couldn't pay off their mortgages, and so they moved. So about 1950s when it really got bad, because that's right about the time they invented DDT, but just before that, there was a farmer named Carlton White who moved from Blakely, Georgia to Lake Wales, Florida, because he lost his cotton farm. Couldn't grow his cotton anymore. However, in Lake Wales, he was able to find work in the orange groves. That was my grandfather. So it still happens, okay? So that was Carlton White, or actually his first name was Connie. And I'm like, where'd you get that name? He's like, we're never passing it on. He always went by Carlton, but it's Connie Carlton White. And that was my mother's father. Okay, and then my dad, all his family worked in the orange groves, so that's how they met. But the important thing is famine is still a real thing for many people, and my grandfather loved the Lord all the way to his death. He loved Jesus with all his heart. Suffering happens to God's people too. Okay, so this guy Elimelech moves his family to Moab, which is weird because Moabs were the enemy. Like the Moabites, just a few chapters ago in Judges, had conquered the Israelites and were like forcing them into slavery. So that's kind of weird. Like, just probably that would have been probably his father's generation. So he probably would have had like some bitterness in his heart, you would think, towards the Moabites. But he was desperate enough. He's like, let's move over there and see if there's food over there. Then they kind of settled. He dies, but she still at least has 2 sons. Now this is interesting because without a father present to lead the family, the 2 sons then marry Moabite women. Now, that is a huge no-no in biblical terms, okay? Now, I know, you don't think of this because you think of color and ethnicity as one term, okay? That's just color of skin and stuff like that, and that's totally accurate in our context. That's not in their context. In their context, you worshipped your God, and you had a culture based on who you were. So the Israelites followed Yahweh, God of the Bible. The Moabites did not. They followed Baal, Asherah, and these other pagan gods like Molech. And just so you know, the way you would worship Molech, who was the god of the harvest, is you would sacrifice babies.
What?
Yeah, see, everyone's like, they weren't that bad. I'm like, they sacrificed babies. Everyone's like, oh, they were terrible. For real, they were terrible, horrible people, okay? So, the fact that these guys married Moabite women was a huge no-no. God is very clear in the New Testament and the Old Testament that Christians are not supposed to marry non-believers. That's actually commanded very clearly in 1 Corinthians 7, okay? That we should not marry outside of our faith, okay? But these guys did it. They married Ruth and they married Orpah. So,
Orpah sounds like Oprah.
Oprah, doesn't it? So, first one is, again, God's people suffer too. All right, so here's number 2. Suffering reveals character. So then Elimelech dies, right? 10 years later, sons die. And now Naomi has become a widow. Not only that, Ruth and Orpah have become widows. Now, you guys don't understand this because our culture is so much different in a very good way. Women could not own property in their culture. Women were property in this culture, okay? No, this is very, for real. You had arranged marriages, okay? And so one father would say to the other father, be like, hey, I like you, I like your son, I like your family, I would like my daughter to marry into your family. I am willing to trade you 12 camels so that my daughter can marry into your family. That's called a dowry. That's actually very still much a real thing in many other cultures. That's a thing. And so when you became a widow, you became homeless because you couldn't own property. You lost all of your money very quickly, and you had no way to make any money because there wasn't a job system. You lived off your land. So if you didn't have any land, you didn't have a way to make a living. So to become a widow without a husband or without sons, you're completely on your own. And all 3 of these ladies find themselves like this. So Naomi does not handle the situation very well. If you look at what she does, she just kind of goes into this crazy cycle of bitterness, grief, rage even, and she begins pushing away the people who love her the most. She's lost all of her family, and all she's got left are these 2 daughter-in-laws. Naomi is so distraught that she begins to hurt them. She lashes out at them, go away, go to your mother's home, get away from me. She begins to push away the people who really should have been the closest to her. But can I just say, when we're in pain, we do that too. Because we don't like pain. No one likes pain. So we try to find ways out of pain or to make pain stop. Or if you're in so much pain, you will cause someone else pain because then in some weird and sick, twisted way, you can then control your own pain. That is like the heartbeat of a bully, but a lot of us do that as well. Right? When you're furious, when you're angry, when you are, and this word comes out real strong, bitter, that's whenever you want to hurt others. Why? Because misery loves company. If I feel miserable, you should be miserable. If I'm hurting, you should be hurting. Because there's nothing like worse when you're miserable when someone else is like happy, right? Like when you are in a miserable state and you're going through life, and you're like, why is that person so happy? It's not fair. Now, more importantly, Naomi says she's bitter because the Lord has dealt bitterly or turned his hand against me. So, because again, it's death, we don't really know why they died. It could have been disease, it could have been part of the famine, it could have been part of a war. We don't really know. She's angry at God. And I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. I've actually been in that situation where life is so bad, you just hate God for it. Like, God, you could have spared me from this. God, you could have done something different. Why'd you have to take that person who I loved? Why'd you have to make me feel this? I could still have this person in my life. You could have controlled that. And so we get angry at God as if God has intentionally, like she says, turned against us. And so